And now to Wikileaks. Late last year, its stash of leaked US diplomatic cables filled the front pages of some of the world's great newspapers. On its website, Wikileaks boasts that
we don't hoard our information. We make the original documents available with our news stories. Readers can verify the truth of what we have reported themselves.
The Guardian and the New York Times have been following that principle. But apparently it doesn't apply to the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Thanks to the deal that Fairfax reporter Philip Dorling had struck with Wikileaks, they produced scoop after scoop last year based on leaked cables from the US Embassy in Canberra.
Rudd's blunders exposed.
Exclusive. Wikileaks. The secret Australian files.
Yank in the ranks. America's Labour Party insider.
Sensational stuff. But if you wanted to verify the truth for yourself, you are out of luck. The cables the stories were based on weren't posted by either newspaper, and they weren't on the Wikileaks website either. When I raised the issue in December, the Sydney Morning Herald's editor-in-chief explained that
we are still mining the source documents. To put the material online would be to give access to our competitors in the local market.
Sounded like hoarding to me and to several other commentators. Soon afterwards, the cables relevant to those early stories were posted on Fairfax websites. But now they're at it again. Back on May the 2nd, this story appeared in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald.
The Wikileaks files.
Labour foiled bomb treaty by Philip Dorling. Australia secretly worked with the United States to weaken a key international treaty to ban cluster bombs, according to leaked US diplomatic cables.
Cluster bombs are those nasty munitions which scatter bomblets across a wide area. Many don't explode until they're picked up months or years later, often by curious children. But though Australia has signed a treaty banning them, America has not. And the US cables, wrote Philip Dorling, revealed that back in 2007 and 2008, Australia was lobbying hard for
the inclusion of a loophole to allow signatories to the convention to cooperate with military forces still using cluster bombs.
The story seems to have been based on several leaked cables. And they're of intense interest because legislation to ratify the Cluster Bomb Convention is to come before the Senate very soon, and many people think it's far too weak. For example, a former Secretary of the Department of Defense wrote in The Age that same day that the legislation
specifically permits foreign forces to base their cluster bombs here or to transit them through Australian territory. It also permits members of the Australian Defence Force to assist in the use of cluster bombs in joint operations with foreign forces.
Ever since the story was published nearly 4 months ago, a lobby group called the Cluster Munition Coalition has been asking Philip Dorling to see the original cables. They were fobbed off in May.
In due course, the cables will be put up on the web, but probably not for a while as they contain other information that will be used in other stories.
And they were fobbed off again this month.
I will get round to looking at the Australian cluster bomb cables again, and have anticipated doing something when the Parliament further debates the issue.
In other words, Fairfax is hoarding these cables, despite Wikileaks' promise. In my book, that makes both organisations look like hypocrites. We've been trying to get a comment from Wikileaks without success, but in a long response, Philip Dorling, on behalf of Fairfax, puts the responsibility back on Wikileaks. According to the agreement he made, he writes,
it was left to myself and Fairfax to publish stories with the expectation that Wikileaks would in due course put Australia-related cables up on its website. I understand that Wikileaks anticipates release of all of the Australia-related cables shortly.
Read the rest on our website. Late last week, Wikileaks did publish tens of thousands of new cables from US embassies around the world, including hundreds from the embassy in Canberra. So far, the cables relating to the cluster bomb treaty aren't among them. But I reckon that it wasn't up to Wikileaks, but to the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age to back up their story with the evidence. It's in the public interest, including that of future victims of these nasty weapons, for the cables to be posted. It's in Fairfax's commercial interest to keep them under wraps. Their editors, not Philip Dorling, bear the responsibility for the choice they've made.